Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Anthony, fresh off a brain freeze. What's the difference between a brain freeze and a normal LaPanta brain, whatever?
Bush brain? Bush brain sometimes has to do with how much Chianti was with dinner last night, and
Right.
a brain freeze has to do with, I had a great workout this morning with a guy named Sean at Farrell's gym, who puts us through like this hour-long kind of a circuit boot camp kind of thing. And I got home and decided I was going to make a quick protein shake before our show, and my blender apparently didn't take care of the ice cubes in it today, so I took a big spoonful and it had a huge ice cube in the middle.
Right.
And it made my brain freeze. So I think it's thawed out now. I should be good to go.
And I heard you were at Seven Vines last night.
I did stop at Seven Vines last night.
Did Margot tell you why I didn't come?
Oh, you know what? Hold on. I think they did. I don't know if she told me, but somebody there said it was. I remember asking, like, well, did he have to go to the hospital? So it must have been some kind of ailment.
Yeah, I had a splitting headache, and then Margot told me you were coming, and I just thought that wouldn't do the headache any good. So,
yeah, well, I was just glad you didn't have to go to the urgency room or anything. Like, we've been there before with too much coffee, with a sore calf because you walked a little bit in Arizona one day. I mean, I'd hate to see you on your way to Seven Vines have to swing into the urgency room.
The sore calf was me landing after a long day of travel from Costa Rica and Vegas. And
I know it was in Vegas. I thought you had walked in Arizona the day before.
No. I was in Costa Rica. I was convinced that I had a blood clot, and then while I was on,
right.
Then I was on the hospital
self-diagnosed blood clot that led you to the emergency room and cost you $20,000.
Yeah, and then you were trying to make fantasy trades with me.
It was the trade deadline.
Yeah. All right. I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about today, Anthony. Nothing continues to happen. At some point.
I think that's interesting, right? Look, just start there for a minute. And we talk every week about how nothing's happened, but I wouldn't worry about it. And I'm not so worry's the wrong word, because neither one of us are in charge of either any potential trades or contract extensions or anything else. But is your level of confidence that a deal will be done between the Wild and Quinn Hughes, has it wavered in any way from the start of the summer to now? And if not, how close to training camp do you get before you have to start to think about, well, what's plan B with Quinn Hughes if they can't get an extension?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's definitely wavered. We're at August 28th. I think where you get a little concerned definitely is, reportedly Cale Makar is going to sign his extension, maybe hopefully during this show, so we can get a little comp. And, I think that, a lot of us have wondered is that there hasn't been a true comp for either of these players. Well, obviously, Cale Makar is about to set the standard on what a star defenseman is. This is a two-time Norris winner, a Stanley Cup champion, a Calder winner, a Conn Smythe winner, a four-time NHL first-team All-Star, Olympian. And Quinn Hughes has always been right there with him. And the only reason why Quinn Hughes didn't win the Calder the 1 year is because Cale Makar was in the league. And so he's always been there, and we know how good Quinn Hughes is. So, clearly whatever the term is that Cale is going to sign, then we'll see what the AAV is, and then we're going to start immediately making comparables. And I think the hope from the Wild standpoint is that it would kickstart negotiations. The deadline, I think at this point we know that Quinn Hughes doesn't necessarily want 8 years. He's not even 27 yet. It makes all the sense in the world to sign a shorter term deal and then hit another home run contract with the cap going up and up and up. I think we've started to see that trend right now with the Leo Carlsons, the Celebrinis of the world, that it doesn't make sense to go long term at a young age, and he's still young and in the peak form of his career. So I don't think this September 15th 8-year deadline means anything to them. But, if Quinn is going to sign with another team next summer, it's going to be 6 years unless the Wild traded him to that team before the deadline. It could be 7 years. I just think that this is going to set a comparable. And then the question is, does it kickstart negotiations? If it doesn't kickstart negotiations, absolutely there'd be a concern. But I think the Wild are still looking at opening night as sort of their deadline at this point. I think this has definitely been. I think the Wild thought this would be an easier negotiation than Kirill was last year. But the difference between Kirill and now is that Kirill helped change the landscape, and now the landscape is 100% changed. And so we'll see where it goes.
So you think that reason you think there's Quinn is and his group, his agent, his representation, all that, you think that they were intentionally delaying this, holding out until they saw what Cale Makar would get in his contract negotiations?
I don't know. That'd be totally conjecture. The only thing I'll say is that the landscape has changed, and I think the Wild went into this offseason thinking that they would, you know, have a set price, probably in that 17 million range where Kirill is. And now suddenly, Celebrini's at 18.8, Leo Carlson's at 18. Cale Makar, maybe his number starts with a 2. We'll find out. Maybe as early as today, maybe as early as this show. And so I just think that it changes everything. The concern that I 100% have is, and you and I have discussed this a little bit, but we haven't really gotten into the nitty-gritty, is that, can you have a team that has 37 million tied up to 2 players, even in this 100 and, whatever cap $1 million world? I mean, that is a lot of money. And then what you're doing is obviously we know Boldy is eventually going to get his payday. But then what you're doing is every summer you're going into the year and you're bargain basing shopping. You're letting a Matt Zuccarello go and replacing him with a wing and a prayer and Maxim Shabanov. You're doing stuff like that. And can you build a cup contender with this type of money, tied up into just 2 players? And again, the Wild want to swing for the fences. They're tightening their window the second they sign Quinn,
Well,
because
but let me
you
stop you there
gotta.
for a second, because I don't think you can if you were then building the rest of your team from scratch in a vacuum.
Mhm.
I don't think that's the best method to try to go about this, to say, all right, I've got 120, let's spend 36 on these 2 guys. But when you already have a few other guys for the short term, for the next 3 or 4 years, that are locked up on deals that are significantly undervalued, meaning that the team is getting a lot more bang for the buck, like they are with Joel Eriksson Ek, like they are with Matt Boldy, for what would be the duration of this short-term Hughes extension, then I think you can, because now you can say, all right, where do you draw the line? Yes, it's 36 million for these 2, but it's 48 million for these 4. And, then you throw in that you've got goaltenders that are at a good price. All right, now it's 60 million for these 6. And so there are some different thresholds, and the Wild
Yeah,
already know they've got some cost certainty in other
yeah.
spots.
But, I mean, they're gonna have to make a big decision on their goaltending this year. Jesper Wallstedt's a Group 2, final year of his deal. He's gonna be the number 1, definitely coming out of camp and for a while. So they're gonna have to make a decision there on whether you're gonna pay him or move him. And if you don't move him and you gotta pay him, then you gotta figure out what to do with Philip Gustafson. And again, if you have Quinn signed at 20 and Kirill at 17, this team is still what it is this season. I mean,
No,
you have a
yeah,
lot of
no
question
question
marks,
about it. I just
you
think
know?
it's a different question than just saying, can you win with that much
Right.
money tied up in 2 guys? I don't think you could if the rest of your roster was a blank sheet.
Yeah.
But when the rest of your roster already has a few guys that you have locked in for these next 3 or 4 years at a price that's a lot cheaper than you could get them on the open market today, that gives you a little more flexibility with it. But, I threw this out to you, I think, last week, and just hypothetically, let's say that there is no extension before the season starts. What do you think then happens for the Wild this season? Is it a spot where you have to make a deal during the season to move Hughes because you've given up so much to get him that you can't afford to let him walk for no return? Is it something that you wait and see how the season starts, and if you're a contender, you say, all right, let's we're still gonna try to push all in at the deadline, knowing that at the end of the season, there's a chance you lose him for nothing. I think it really puts the team in a tough spot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the pressure point is opening night. I think that if you don't sign him, eventually you are going to have to trade him. The question is when. I don't think that you can give up the assets that they gave up for Quinn Hughes and not recoup some of it. It would be to me disastrous. And I think the other reason why the pressure point is the start of the season is if they get off to a tough start. I mean, this is again I'm looking at I got the schedule right here, Anthony. I mean, it is have you ever seen a schedule where 21 of the first 28 games are on the road? I mean, that is half the road games in the first 28 games,
Yeah,
essentially.
I think they had didn't they have a schedule just a couple of years ago where we had
They
it was
opened with,
it was like
that
7 out of 9 on the road to
yeah,
open,
yeah,
but I
but
think it was like 16 out of 24 or something that year. It
yeah.
was I think this is the second time in, like, the last 4 years where the Wild have had a schedule like this, because I remember that time asking, was there some did the Wild request this? Did they ask to be on the road a lot early because of, like, arena conflicts and I remember them just saying, "No, this is just how it worked."
Yeah.
And I think that year they had a 7-game trip and a 5-game trip really early. Like, the 7-game trip, they stopped at home for a couple days or something,
Yeah,
but there were
yeah.
no games, and then they were home then for, like, 3 games and then back on the road for 5 more right out of the gates.
Yeah. That was the year yeah, remember they went to Winnipeg, it's
It was
I
like
can't
St.
remember.
Louis and
Yeah,
Winnipeg, they stopped at home,
yeah,
and then we went east, and it was a 5-game Eastern swing,
yeah,
so it wound up being 7 road games in a row,
yeah,
but it was
Spurgeon
like
wasn't there.
yeah, it was like, he joined him in the middle. I think they
Yeah.
wound up
That
in
was
New
the year
York.
where they didn't have a deficit in the first, until they got to Philadelphia. Remember?
Right. Yeah, in
Yeah, yeah.
Philadelphia, they outshot them like 40-10 and lost the
Yeah.
game, gave up like 7 goals or something like that.
Yeah, almost set an NHL record for longest, to start the season without a deficit. But this is, you know, I don't know. This is tough. This is a brand new team too. When you think about the number of top six forwards that they've lost, um, you know, again, and not having Zuccarello is big. I mean, you even just think about when Zuccarello came back last year and they started. He misses the first month, comes back, they're struggling, and he turned the entire. His return coincided with the return with the bounce back of the entire season. They had a point in 12 straight games. He's scoring overtime winners and things like that. It's a big loss. So I just think the pressure point for Quinn is opening night. I think the Wild would look at that as the deadline too. The only thing I could say is, and this is not from the Wild side, is that every thing I'm hearing from Quinn's side is that so far he's given the Wild every impression that his intention is to sign. So, we'll see if Cale Makar doesn't kickstart things. Then then obviously there's a bit of an issue here. But the Wild continue to believe that this is just business as usual and that this is just a negotiation. So we'll see where it goes. Anthony, September 14th at Tuttle's is our next live show, 7 p.m. Have Margo put that on your calendar, if you can. What have you been up to the last couple weeks?
I've actually been trying to get some season prep work done to start building files and I always say I'm gonna do it earlier in the summer each year, and I never get to it until about now. A lot of golf. Golf game's been good, and now I'm just kind of itching to get back to work, but I have been it's you start to get into that mindset of, "All right, I gotta remind myself, like, what I did each morning, what stat files I wanna have, what templates I wanna have built, and all of those kinda things to make it so that it's easier once the season starts." Because as you know, once you get into the season, it's really hard to then start, "Oh, yeah, I wanted to this year have a file that I built that went game by this," and to spend time building it and repopulating it once you're already into games takes a lot more time than building it in advance. So I've been working on that a little bit, always just trying to tweak and we've got some and we still don't know a lot of the answers with our TV situation this year with, where games are going to be found and those details. But what we do know is there's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes and it's just different. I'd worked for the same company for 22 years
Mhm.
and we were in such a routine where it was in the summer, we'd start having these conversations, everything from, who's going to be in what city to how are we going to handle game nights to different ideas for pregame shows, that kind of stuff. And with how we got a late start this year with not knowing who some of these people were going to be, who some of the behind the scenes people were going to be, who really even who all the on air people were going to be. So, we're kind of playing a little catch up with that stuff now to just make sure that nothing's falling through the cracks. That this used to always, for 20 years, it's fallen under this guy's umbrella. Well, who is that guy? We don't have the same structure that we had in the past. And we don't have that specific guy. We now have these three guys who are handling different parts of it. So who should we talk to about this? Who's going to handle this? Who's going to take care of this? Who's going to get us set up for that? And so I've had a lot of conversations in that way. And hopefully this becomes a seamless thing. I think it'll be close to that. I'm sure we'll have some bumps early. We are going to do a couple of preseason games to shake the rust off for guys like me and to, make sure everybody that's in a new spot is comfortable. And I don't know that we've locked in which two they're going to be yet, but I think we're going to do two of them, and which I love because it allows you a couple games to get back into your season flow a little bit. And, so there's been a lot of that, a lot of season prep stuff.
Hopefully, it's the road games that you go to so we can, watch it back here since I find it a waste of money to travel during the preseason. I used to do it all the time for the Strib, and then I just kinda stopped because,
I wonder if
but
it'll be different now with
yeah,
only
well,
four games.
now that they have real rosters and yeah. That's actually a good point. Maybe we'll change our little path here. I have booked the first couple months of the season. I want a lot of them. Anthony, the without getting yourself in trouble, are you able to give at least a timeline on when you think that the streaming service will be announced and the plans on where you could be found this season on cable and over the air will be announced?
I don't know when. I keep thinking it. I mean, not that it's I shouldn't say, I don't wanna make it sound like every day I'm, like, hoping it comes today, but I think it could be every day. I just keep thinking, like, well, maybe tomorrow, or because every time I have any conversation with anybody involved with our broadcast, it always sounds like, "We're getting close, we're getting close, we're getting close," and, I don't it's not under my umbrella of authority anyway, so it isn't. I have 0 stress about it other than that I know that it's gonna make the other people on the crew potentially stressed, which then affects everything else. Because for some of them, like the sooner they know the answers to all this stuff, the sooner they can start making specific plans. And, I keep thinking it's going to happen any day now.
Mhm.
And I do think once it's done, it isn't going to be any harder for Wild fans to find the games this year. I really think it might end up to be easier once it's done. But I
Yeah,
just,
because I mean, if you're a Wild fan and you watch it on cable dish versus and you don't have that, then you're streaming. It's basically going to be one or the other. I mean, you're basically always going to watch it on your normal cable station if you have cable. If you have dish, it's going to be there. If you don't have either of those and you have to subscribe, you know that you're watching it on Prime or whatever the heck the streaming service is
the
going to
Wild
be.
app, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean. I think it'll end up being just as, if not easier, for fans to find it. But it is. I mean, I get asked every day about it, and I get it. People they want to get set up. They want to make sure that whatever they need to have, they have. And all I can tell them is that I think there's going to be a linear option. There's going to be a chunk of games that are available over the air, but I believe that all of them will be available on some streaming app if you don't have either cable, satellite, or that option.
Um. By the way, this is the Aquarius Home Services studio, and Aquarius was over at my house yesterday. Incredible as always. I had a air conditioner problem. Brandon fixed it like that, so I appreciate it. Anthony, what was I going to ask you? The second half, the national TV came out. And of your 17 games that you lose, almost the majority are in the second half of the season, starting in like January. Anthony, you're gonna be rested for the playoffs.
Yeah, I know, it's
Your
and
voice won't be cracking this season.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I believe we'll end up with a couple that are side by side because the 17, I believe, is beyond what the national max is that they can take exclusively,
Mm-hmm.
and just as it was last year, I think they took 16, but the max was 14, so we wound up with a couple that we did side by side.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think the max might have been 13 last year, I'm not sure. I think it went from 13 to 15 with the 2 added games. I could be off on that, but I believe there will be a couple that are side by side, and uh, I mean, it's the nature of the business, and I think I talked about this on a couple shows ago that, I mean, number 1, I get it, the national rights holders are, they're paying big dollars to these teams. In the past, it used to be that the teams were getting probably more from their regional sports partners than they were their chunk of the national deal, but,
Mm-hmm.
now with some of these teams doing their own thing, that's not the case. Not that they don't lose something when they don't do their own game, they can't sell the advertising on it and all that. But I wish there was some kind of a logical look at this to say, look, I don't believe the first game they're taking is until December, if I remember right when I looked at it. Maybe there was one before December or something
Yeah.
like that. But I mean, who looks at this and says, "Yeah, this seems like a fair deal. Let's have the local TV guys do all the games in October, November, and early December when, everybody's still just getting it. Everybody knows the viewership is down then, and then allow the national guys to take that many from any one team seems ridiculous to me at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the year. But until the owners say, we'd like to see this changed, it isn't going to change. But the other point I'd make is we just kinda know that that's gonna happen when you're
Yeah.
when you're the
I
when you're
I actually think
affiliated.
it's gonna, now that in a couple years the US TV rights are gonna be, renegotiated, and there's gonna be probably more teams coming into the NHL. I actually think it's just gonna get harder and harder because we know that the money, is gonna be going up, and the divvy to 34 teams is, it's I think it's gonna
Right.
get harder.
Well, it might, but this goes to my other point that I was gonna make is it's really one of the few times where you've got rights deals like this that are so slanted toward some of these teams, and I'm glad that I'm a part of an organization that is in demand, that they know that our local viewership is among the best in the league. The team has excitement league-wide. It has national draws because there's superstars here. You look at some of those other teams that are losing 2 and 4 games to national TV, and you think, "Well, yeah, as a broadcaster, I'd much rather do 82 games than 67." But at the same time, I'd rather be calling 67 games for the Minnesota Wild than 82 games somewhere else in the league where there isn't as much interest, there isn't as much excitement, the fan base isn't the same. So I'm not it's kind of a double-edged sword because yes, I'd love to do 84 games instead of 67, but at the same time, if the trade-off meant that you were then working in a market where the fans weren't as excited and the viewership wasn't as high and the national interest wasn't as high, that's part of what you get with it, and so, but, we'll do the games that we get, and if it somehow changes where we get to do more of them, great, and if not, but it sucks when it comes to March and all of a sudden the games are big and the race is tight and there's excitement, and then we do, like, 2 out of 6 games at one point in there, and that's tough.
Yeah, and you lose both Devils games this year, which obviously is always gonna be,
Yeah.
as long as the Hugheses are on the other side. The Wild have had buzzer beaters the Boldy one's still one of my favorite, calls of yours.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, you
Yeah, and
were, actually, that brings me to so Jay texted me, friend of the show, wants to know your 3 most favorite goal calls ever. Um By the way, he said you could do them if you want. Um,
it's
but what are
interesting
your
as I
3
just
your
I
Yep.
just had some fans ask me that when I was up in Brainerd for that golf tournament a couple weeks ago to help promote Hockey Day Minnesota up there, and I had a guy when we did a little talk after the golf tourney and talking to some of the fans, and he asked me the same question. He said, "Give me your top two." And number one will always, well, I mean, I shouldn't say always, but for the foreseeable future, unless the broadcast landscape changes, Game
Nino.
7, Nino in Denver. I mean, Game 7 in a Stanley Cup playoff series, just and then overtime. There's just nothing like it. And that
I thought
game had,
your Spurgeon goal call that game was just as good, but
I actually, yeah, I mean, I thought, yeah, I agree with you. And it's kind of such an overlooked goal, and it might be,
the
it
biggest.
might be the biggest
Yeah,
goal because
yeah.
it was the fourth time they had tied it. It was an amazing goal. The
I mean,
Boldy one
I
you
could still see
mentioned,
it. Nino backhands it, and then Spurgeon just waits for McKinnon to
slide
slide
by.
out of the screen and
Yeah.
just pick this corner.
And
But
have it be for Spurgeon, who, you know, is such an underappreciated player, especially at that time in his career where he did so much more than most people
yeah,
knew on a nightly basis.
isn't that crazy?
Um,
It's 12 years ago.
I know. And the Boldy goal that you mentioned was an exciting one. There have been a few overtime goals where it's just been end to end to end, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody scores that it would be hard to necessarily pick out one that stands out from some of the others. There were a couple over the years, but the Boldy one's right up there because it was just such
Yeah,
an incredible finish. I remember one when Foligno just came off the bench in an overtime that was a terrific finish. But I will say that, like, this goes back to really early in my career. One of still maybe it's gotta be in my top 5 was actually a Hill Murray White Bear Lake section semifinal game at the Fairgrounds Coliseum. Hill Murray was ranked number 1 in the state. They were like 21-1-1 or something like that on the year. White Bear was under 500. The two teams had played during the season, and Hill had beaten them like 8-0 and 10-1 or something like that. And White Bear upset them in overtime. It was the first week of Kevin Gorg's broadcasting career, I might add, because he had lost to that White Bear team in the previous round. And the agreement I had made with Kevin and the coach at White Bear was Mike Schwartz at the time. Said, whoever loses that first round playoff game has to come and be my analyst on KABL television for the rest of section final week. And we did like maybe 7 games in 4 nights because we had a couple double headers during section week. And the last one was this Hill White Bear. Actually, this was a semifinal game, so it wasn't the last one, but it was an unbelievable setting. Coliseum's jam-packed, and Sean Rode, a freshman from White Bear, scored the game winner in overtime to beat Hill Murray 4-3. And Landon Luther was the goalie for White Bear. I think he had like 38 saves or something. It was just an unbelievable night. And it was one of my favorite goal calls I've had just because of the magnitude of the upset. And Kevin Gorg's, I think he added something on the end of it that was, he had some great Gorgisms during that week where it was the, you know, northbound train on a southbound track and all this kind of stuff where I was like, what is with this guy? But we had a great time. But that game, that might be number 3 on my
yeah.
all-time list.
Hey, it's Russo for Aquarius Home Services, your independent authorized Connecticut dealer. Summer is the perfect time to tackle home improvements, and now you have even more time to save because Aquarius has extended their summer trade-in and trade-up sale through August. If your old water softener isn't getting the job done, trade it in and trade up to a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. Through August, get an additional $500 off on top of their summer sale prices. Whether it's city or well, imagine cleaner, worry-free water right from every tap. I've had a Connecticut system in my home since we basically started this podcast, and it's provided me perfect tasting water for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and protecting my home. The best part? It all starts with a free water test in your home or cabin, and take it from me, it's cool watching the technicians' chemistry experiments. Schedule today at AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended, and don't forget to tell them Russo sent you.
Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We could switch on the lights, we switch TV channels, some of us even switch our favorite sports teams. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you could switch and save with Tony Hoagland State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Tony Hoagland and his team can switch you over so you can start saving today. If you thought your last homeowner's insurance renewal was really high, or it's been a while since you reviewed your coverages, Tony and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Tony and his team, it's easy to switch and save. You could reach out to Tony's office at 763-421-4900 to start saving today. Again, that's 763-421-4900.
You know I like hockey, but what I'd really rather be doing this fall is sitting in a deer stand. Just sitting there for hours, dead quiet, not moving, not talking, no LaPanta bothering me, just staring at the woods, waiting for a deer to walk by. And now I know what you're thinking, Russo, you don't hunt. And you're right, but if you're going to sit in a tree for 6 hours this fall, you might as well see some deer. The onX Hunt app can help with that, with purpose-built features like cell camera integration, wind calendar, deer movement forecast, and much more. Make the time in the stand count with onX Hunt.
Did you know Scott Bloom?
I knew him. He wasn't like a friend of mine or anything, but I didn't know him. In fact, I had just seen him at Kevin's dad's funeral earlier in the summer. Tragic story. I know Kevin was still fairly close with him and was still in touch with him at least. And I mean, over the years I had seen him at a few hockey functions and things, but I didn't know. I wouldn't say that I knew him personally.
Just a tragic story, totally. Before we move on to X questions, Anthony, Connor Hellebuyck has gone public with his trade request that he made several months ago. Obviously, the goal with training camp, really less than 3 weeks away, is to try to put pressure on Winnipeg to move him now. I think that it's an interesting story because obviously he's fresh off signing, a deal in the $8 million range, a 7-year deal in 2023. He's obviously, has a really bargain contract comparatively to goaltenders. I mean, this is a Hart Trophy and Vezina winner. And so, I don't think Winnipeg just wants to give him away. But now, the question is, can you move him? I mean, do you have to move him at half price on the dollar? Like it's going to be, there's no pressure from Winnipeg to have to move him, but you have your goalie coming out here. Is he threatening not to show up to camp? So what do you think of this? It seems like he's willing to play ball and go to really, several different teams. So this isn't a situation where he's got a no move and has said, send me there. Kind of like Brady Tkachuk, where he basically gave 3 teams or 4 teams, but he wanted to go to Florida. It seems like he's willing to go, if Colorado wanted him, if New Jersey, who, remember in 2023, before he signed his deal, was really felt like close to almost acquiring him. Buffalo, and, there are teams out there, Carolina, as we know. There are teams out there that need goaltenders. And it seems like he's willing to go to a team, one of many, but they want clearly a huge price for him, understandably so.
Right. I got to tell you, I am so anti-player in these situations. You sign the contract.
Yeah.
You negotiated the best deal you could get. The organization gave you life-changing money. And to, number one, request a trade, even that in and of itself, to me, is a black check. But then to go public with it. I mean, if you really wanted to help the team, then just keep it private. You went to nobody would know except for you, your agent, and the general manager, that you went and said, this isn't working out. I'd love to be traded. But the moment that you go public with it, now what happens? Now all your teammates know. Now all your fans know. Yeah. Now it makes it almost impossible for the team to not trade you, to keep you, so that to me is like, well, good for you. You're willing to play ball and go other places. If you had just kept your mouth shut and maybe let the GM do his work, at least then there's the door open to, if the right trade isn't out there. Now, I mean, that's kind of what I've been saying about the Larkin situation in Detroit, is how in the world do you have your captain come back into the room and say, okay, guys, let's go to battle together, when everybody in the room knows you want it out? And I'm so tired of these players that, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to be traded." Well, you know what? Then you shouldn't have signed the contract when you signed it. You
Yeah.
signed an 8-year deal, you demanded it, you fought
Oh,
for it, you had earned it, don't get me wrong, you had earned it, but now then you owe it to that team to play out the contract, and if you wanna say, "Look, I'd love to maybe go take a shot somewhere else." Keep it quiet and just go to the GM and see if the right deal happens, it happens. But as soon as you make it public, I think I it would if I was on the ownership side, which I'm really not, but if I was, this would drive me
yeah.
berserk.
It really is an interesting situation, and I do want to take the other side here in a second and ask you about that. But this is interesting because he when he signed the deal, it felt like even then that he was almost, that he wanted at that point out, and he'd signed the deal because how do you turn down this type of guaranteed money at the time? You knew it was in Winnipeg, and what I mean by that is not a shot at Winnipeg by any stretch of the imagination, because actually, from what I've talked to, whenever I talk to Hellebuyck, he loves it up there. He loves the outdoor living up there. He's a big guy that loves to go out into the woods and fish and hunt and all that type of stuff. What I mean is the challenges of being in Winnipeg, of getting players to go there, and it's not easy to have an organization there if that players, one, right now don't want to play north of the border because of tax reasons and things like that, but two, it just seems like that city is just it's hard to get players to go there. So you knew those challenges, and now a couple years later you want out. But what do from your standpoint about being anti-player, what's your reaction to the fact that every single day in all of professional sports, a team will show no loyalty to a player and uproot that guy's life and just trade him? They do the same thing. Now players are finally taking control of their careers and basically saying, "You know what? I want out." And we don't rip the teams when they just suddenly, I mean, remember Eric Stahl, he turns into his no trade list, doesn't have Buffalo on it that day. Bill Guerin just sent him to Buffalo. And we didn't rip Bill Guerin in the Wild for that decision, so that stuff happens all the time in the National Hockey League and all of pro sports.
Yeah, which is true, and, that goes back to the discussion we had maybe a couple of months ago, where we were talking about no trade clauses and, like, look, the players negotiate for those. As long as the teams are willing to give them, then the player has every right to negotiate for them, and there's nothing that says you can't, and once you've negotiated for it, then so be it. Then you've got it. But the players coming and saying, "Hey, I'd like to be traded, and here are the only 2 teams or 3 teams that I'm open to, or here are the 6 teams." When All right, well, when you negotiated the no move, we thought this was a mutual thing, like that you're here and we're in this together. And I just think I think it's a dangerous slope, and maybe I'm a little jilted because of the fact that I think, yes, the players do get uprooted, and I've always said to fans that you don't understand, these aren't like names on a piece of paper. These are actual humans with families and friends, and when they have to move, it's not a small thing.
Mhm.
When a coach gets fired, when a player gets cut, or when a player gets traded, or whatever, it's no small thing. But there might just be a little bit, maybe it's in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, like, you signed on for this career knowing that this was very likely to be a part of your career, is that there and the trade-off is that you've got life-changing money in your pocket. Quite literally, every one of these players has life change. Even the guys on the entry-level deals, they're making close to $1 million.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, yeah, the minimum salary is going up.
right.
So
99% of America would take a 1-year contract for $1 million just about anywhere, doing anything, even if it meant they might have to move. And so, these aren't, most of the players in the league are making more than $1 million. So when you start to say, well, yeah, this guy, he's got to uproot his family. Well, he's getting paid $5 million a year.
yeah.
I mean, so he's got to move for 6 months or live apart from his family or whatever it is. I don't know. Maybe it's because I think your point's valid. When owners just trade players, they don't have any. But at the same time, it isn't owners going into that most of that is behind the scenes, and that's what I'm saying. What I would prefer to have these players do is, if you really would like to be traded, just keep it quiet between you and the GM, and let the fans and teammates find out about it the day you get traded. And if that way, if the trade doesn't work out,
What
it doesn't
fun is
work
that
out.
for us beat writers? That's not fun.
Yeah,
We
then you
want
can
to
just keep.
know. We want to report.
I
Plus,
don't know.
you were all excited about the Eric Stahl trade because it began your love affair with Marcus Johansson. So
Well, I
you
was
were.
a big Eric Stahl fan when he was here. He was actually one of my favorite players. I
I'm
really
just
thought,
kidding.
yeah, I thought he had more. I thought he had more to give when
Yeah,
the deal happened, but
yeah,
and I get it, but that is a part of the game, and I just feel like maybe I'm a little bit jilted because of that it used to always be the owners were in complete command. The players have more and more freedom now. Free agency keeps changing, and
yeah.
I just think once you're under contract, you had your chance to go somewhere else when you were a free agent, and you signed a contract, so now honor that.
Yeah. All right, let's go to X questions. Again, September 14th is our next live show. That is at Tuttle's at 7 p.m. That's a couple days before players, quote unquote, report for training camp. So we'll have a lot to talk about at that point. We'll know if Quinn is signed or not signed, but we'll also be talking a lot about the team specifically, more than the abstract. All right. Chris Faint asks, what fan base in the NHL annoys you the most on this platform? That's probably a question. I'm sure, Anthony, you are not aware of this because you just stay off X, but I said a couple clumsy things to Devils fans this week that exploded, and really actually regret it. You know what's bad about today's day and age too, Anthony? So I made a stupid comment about the fact that Devils don't have like traditional beat writers, and that's not the way I meant it. It came across that way. What I was basically, I just got off the phone. I just written a story and got off the phone with some sources that basically were just denying the fact that there were any conversations going on with New Jersey regarding Quinn in terms of trades or any team. And the person that I was talking to, who by the way was not Bill Guerin, was just going on about how, in today's day and age, you have these just, AI and bloggers and all that stuff that just make stuff up and it erupts. And then, when I was a young sports writer, I remember there was a really bad trade rumor about the Florida Panthers. And my editor said to me, we don't write stories to refute other people's reports. But today's day and age, you cannot just ignore it, right? It just, if an AI story is written by some rumor site, and it erupts, then you get asked and asked and asked. Finally, you do have to at least ask the question. And so anyway, this was in my mind, and I basically, I feel like I'm making an excuse, but I was getting chirped by a couple Devils fans, and I just said something stupid without thinking about the actual writers that I was portraying basically were not real writers. And you know me better than anybody, Anthony. You know the respect I have for independent journalists, up and coming writers. You see the mentorship that I do with these people, and I turn myself in one stupid, clumsy tweet into the type of elitist journalists that I absolutely loathe. And so anyway, so then what happened was I felt like absolute dog crap, and I called up one of the writers, and I've reached out to a bunch of them, and I apologized, profusely to this person who was incredible. James Nichols is his name. And I've talked to other people as well. And next thing you know, it's like I'm being disingenuous with my apologies, according to people. Like today's day and age, you can't apologize even. Like people want you to apologize, and you apologize, and it's people just assume that it's insincere when the truth is I felt garbage about it. People are cynical about it. They're like the New York Times made me apologize. I have not heard from one person at the New York Times, one editor about my tweet. This is not about that. This was me genuinely feeling like crap, like I insulted, beat writers in New Jersey. And so I apologize. So I think that's what this is talking about. Regardless, as you know, Anthony, I got to be more mature and professional on X and not let the fans get to me. I would give anything to be like you, Anthony, and not even look. But I'm incapable of looking.
Yeah, I don't. I mean,
There's no way you know any of this was going on.
no, but, um, But I mean, I have zero interaction with other. I mean, there's not a. I guess maybe I'm trying to think of arenas that we go in where I find the fans obnoxious, and I mean, maybe I mean Vegas a little bit, but not really. I mean, their fans just seem like they're fun, they're happy,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, this person's more talking about just this platform, and the reality
yeah.
is that I'm sure Wild fans are the same way to other writers. We are in this weird like era where if you report news, the beat right, even during games, like if you're just tweeting out things that happen in a game, it's like the beat writer from the other team is the one that like other fan bases target as to throw all your, venom at. And maybe it's a way because they know that the fans of that team are going to read it, so then that's the way that they start their back and forth. But there's just so much rage baiting on this platform. It's brutal. I mean, there's people that are on here that like doom scroll. It's like they spend every waking hour on this site. Like even I don't do that. You might not believe me, Anthony, but even I try not to do that. But there are some people that just their entire life just seems to be rage baiting and doom scrolling and trolling and all that stuff. And so anyway, as after months of getting it, it became exhausting. I had a very stressful week, and so I did spend a lot of time, unfortunately, scrolling Twitter while I was waiting for, with something at a hospital, and I at the hospital just lost it. So anyway, so I stupidly replied. So
And
there you go.
you did. I mean, we don't have to go into that part of the story, but you did kind of touch on something that I find interesting, where it's an interesting dynamic between beat writers, between broadcasters, and where sometimes guys like they take it so personally that like they'll come in and say things to me that where like a Wild player will have. Let's say a Wild player has delivered a cheap shot in a game, and they'll come in and like, "Oh, I suppose that you look at what your guys get away with." I'm like, "What, my guys? Like, I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
on the bench saying, hey, somebody go out and take a two-handed chop at somebody's ankle.' I mean, it always kind of makes me laugh. And like when a call will go the Wild's way, and they'll come in, can you believe the crap call that you guys just got? And like, what do you want me to like apologize to you? I don't have anything to do with this. But there are some times where like people they get so passionately involved with the team that they cover, that they follow, that it almost becomes like you're I don't know, shouting matches is a strong word, but like I've seen conflicts happen where it's just this team thinks that guy delivered a cheap shot, and it's the broadcasters then that like get upset at the other team's broadcasters, and it just doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense to me.
I just what to me it's weird and is like if you don't read me on an everyday basis or listen to me on the fan on an everyday basis or on this podcast on an everyday basis, it's like if you say anything pro Wild, people just accuse you of being a homer and things like that. And I think you know me better again than anybody. I think I'm the complete opposite of that. Ask anybody inside the Wild organization if I'm a homer. If anything, they think that I'm, too critical. I know on here, I've often been extremely critical. In my writing, I've often been extremely critical. Read me after a loss and tell me I'm a homer. So like, I don't know. People they just show up and don't pay attention. And it's not their job to pay attention to every single article you write or every single, especially if you're an out of town person. But this summer has been just bizarre. And again, I mean, if Quinn Hughes leaves here, we'll be writing all year about how much of a disaster it was for the Wild and what they gave up to get him, and
Well,
where it's now put the organization and
it's
all
probably
that.
to some degree an example of what I'm talking about. The tension
Yeah.
level is high. The Devils fans are hearing rumors that like Jack Hughes is going to get traded somewhere, and I'm sure anxiety level's high. I
Yeah.
mean, they're
And the one
fans.
thing, the difference here with most other things is I think that we all are assuming we know at some point the Hughes brothers want to play together. I mean, Quinn Hughes and Jack Hughes said it to me in a group of 4 or 5 writers last September at the NHL media tour in Vegas. Jim Rutherford has gone on the record saying that they know. So at some point they do want to play together. The question is it now? So, or in a year from now. So we will see. All right, let's just continue, just run through a couple of these. John wants to know, for Anthony, I'm torn on picking wine this summer. Most of my guests want a chilled light white on a warm summer night. What are your recommendations for reds in the summer?
Well, I'll give you two. One is a chilled white, and that's a Vermentino. You'll love it. It's a great wine for sitting on the patio. But I've actually started drinking a red that we drink chilled. It's a Corvina grape, which is up mostly most of the time you'll find it up in like the Venice and Verona area, like northern Italy. But look for a Corvina grape. The one that I like is, I don't know how to pronounce it. Skaya, I think, is the vineyard. Scaia. Kowalski's carries it. I think Total Wine carries it. But try that. I think you'll love it. But serve it chilled. Like, we'll throw it in the fridge and drink it at the same temp as we drink a white. And it's a really easy drinking red that we've had more than a few of them over the course of the summer.
Yep. Definitely we have. All right. Big in Media wants to know, what does Kaprizov need to do over the next 5-ish years for him to be worth this contract he signed? He had a great year last year, but still feel like there's another level to his game that isn't there as consistently as one would like. I don't disagree with this, Anthony. I do think this is a big reason why the Wild made the decision to let Matt Zuccarello walk. I do think, Billy will obviously, and John Hines will never say it publicly, but I think there were times last year that they were not happy with the level of game that Kirill had and felt like they were playing too east-west or, could only play with one player. And I think they just decided, it might take a step back and he might have to learn to play with other guys, but we're letting Matt's walk as a sort of a, compromise to that.
Yeah, I think Kirill's, I don't want to say struggles, but I think they were oftentimes exaggerated. This is a guy who scored 45 goals last year. He's scored over 40 the last 4 full seasons that he's played. The year that he didn't was a year that he was on pace for 50 when he was injured halfway through the year. And, I think sometimes when you get a superstar player like that you just end up with, people always look at what they don't do instead of what they do. And what he does is score goals at a level that very few in the NHL can match. And, the Zuccarello thing, I mentioned it a few shows ago, I think right after the Wild had made it clear he wasn't coming back. If you look at Kirill's numbers, they're almost identical, whether he's with Zuccarello or not. Zuccarello's numbers were exponentially better when he was with Kaprizov. When he wasn't with Kaprizov, I think he was at like a 42% expected goals, where Kirill with Zuki was right around 50-50, and he was right around 50-50 without him. And it just is, I think it was a lot more that Kaprizov made Zuccarello than Zuccarello made Kaprizov. And I think that's why, and I think the Wild looked at it and said, Zuccarello's number is going to be inflated because of the fact that he plays with Kirill. And, when you look at the Wild's roster, it made sense to play the two of them together. Even right now, if you put Zuccarello back on this Wild roster, where would he fit? He'd fit with Kirill Kaprizov. That there just isn't a guy that, maybe Shabanov fits there as well or better, but it would just make sense to put Zuccarello back in that same spot. And if he was there, they'd produce. But I think the Wild's thought is, but if you put anybody there, they might produce. Not anybody, but if you put somebody else there, Kaprizov's production is not likely to go down, And now we can get the same production from Kaprizov with somebody that costs a lot less in that
Yeah.
spot, and you spend your money somewhere else. So I
We
think it
will,
had
we will
more to
see if
do with
that's true.
I think it had more to do with that than
Yeah.
that Kirill needs to learn how to play with other people, because Kirill's game is
Yeah.
just
But
fine
I
no
mean, I
matter who
do
he's
think
playing
that
with.
I do think that they'd like him to take over games more. I mean, he gets a lot of his points on power plays, a lot in overtime. Even strength wasn't great. And I will say, I mean, you know, Matt Zuccarello's an elite playmaker. Kirill Kaprizov's an elite goal scorer, so obviously Matt's numbers would be better with him than anybody else. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. Let's just run through a couple others. Um, Totally random question. Does the Wild or any NHL team pay attention to the assigned refs for any a given game? If they have Gord Dwyer or Jean Hébert, does that make any difference at all in terms of their game plan? I would say no. They definitely know who the officials are and put their first names behind the bench and in the locker room more from a respect standpoint. I've told the story before about a Wild player that would, for years, basically call a linesman liney, and the linesman got mad at him one night and said that he's been in the league longer than Mikko was the player, and basically, um, you know, uh, got himself into trouble, and finally Mikko learned this player's name, this linesman's name, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, the respect level went up, and I think that's why linesmen and referees' names are often on inside of teams. Um, basically, so you have much better respect level if you go up to a player, to go up to a referee and linesman, and you sit there and you know their name and you treat them like a man and all that stuff than the other way around. And I think that's basically the extent of it. I don't think there's game planning for referees. Maybe linesmen on faceoffs and things like that, but really not in terms of the refs.
I think it's minimal,
Yeah.
if anything.
Yep. Min sports fan, put yourself in Quinn's shoes. Why would you sign an extension now? On paper, the Wild are worse, so why not see if Guerin can add another center? Also, you're a year away from having all the control and deciding where you play in your prime. That to me is more the issue. It's not that the Wild have gotten worse or things like that. I think why would he sign now? One, guaranteed money now if you get hurt, um, and a lot of it. And again, like this got misconstrued, and I'm going to do it again and probably create aggregation again because a lot of it's stuff that I said on the sheet was dotted, and maybe I used the wrong word in ode. But the only thing that Quinn has said on multiple occasions is that he respects how much Bill Guerin gave up for him and will, quote, remember that. He said that on multiple occasions. And so I think there's just a lot of people that think that Quinn is still going to sort of give the Wild the 3 more years, or at least 4. And because of what the Wild stepped up, because he's such a fan of the game and knows what the Wild gave up to get him. And I think there's a lot of people that believe that. But in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it would probably make sense for him to just become a free agent and pick his spot and make a lot of money. Again, the most he could, if the Wild didn't trade him to that team, is a 6-year term. So you could be leaving actual dollars on the table. But I think that's what it comes down to, Anthony. What's your thought on that? Like, what's the benefit? Like, why
Well,
would Quinn sign?
I think the benefit is that he has enough leverage to sign a short-term deal here with the Wild. 3
Yeah,
years is the number people keep throwing out, which still leaves you at a spot where at the end of that contract, you can sign one more home run deal. If you sign a 3-year deal now with the cap going up, it allows you more flexibility at a time when the cap is bigger. So, if you go to free agency right now, and there might be teams that are saying, look, we'll give you the 20 million a year, but only if you're willing to commit to us for 6 years. We're not going to give you that for 3. It could be a leverage spot where it's better to try to hit that home run 3-4 years down the road when the
yeah.
cap number is
And at
bigger.
his age, if he signs a 3-year extension, that he'll be a free agent again at 30. He'll
At
have
30,
a chance
which
to make
is
his money,
right.
unite with his brothers if he wanted.
And for the next 3
Yeah.
years, you're going to be a part of a team that has the core we talked about earlier in this show. They're all here for those 3 years.
Yeah.
So you've got Kirill Kaprizov, Jule Erikssonek, Matt Boldy, Brock Faber, goaltending. You've got
Yep.
the other key pieces in place for those 3 years. You know, none of those guys are going anywhere. At the very least, you're going to be a contender, a playoff team with that core intact.
Yeah. But again, like, it would make all the sense of the world to not sign. What I basically said on the sheet, I think it was that again was aggravated, and like we do it too. But you take a snippet of the show. You have all these Twitter accounts that hopefully when Elon in a couple weeks gets rid of paying people for having a blue check mark, maybe this will dissipate because these people get paid essentially to make their tweets go viral. They dotted everything I said out, and it made it sound like I say that Quinn Hughes owes the Wild. I absolutely don't believe Quinn Hughes owes the Wild. What I was saying, and unfortunately I used the word owe, is that Quinn has said publicly on more than one occasion that he will remember what the Wild gave up for him. That was it. But of course, everything's broken out of context. Into Wild hockey, when will we get a peek at the New Jersey design for this year? The league is going to put them all out together at the same time. As usual, this league does everything slow, but it makes sense as it's closer to camp when people are paying attention more to hockey. Let me just run through here. Is there a possibility, AJ Spears says, that we move out Trenyon or Sturm to open up a roster stop for Haight or Strammel, even if they're just rotating in on the third or fourth line? I mean, look, there are 13 forwards right now that are NHL forwards, not including them. So they are going to have to knock the Wild socks off in training camp to make the team. If they are good enough to make the team and the Wild feel that way, or they sustain injuries, the Wild will try to create room. It might not happen necessarily by opening night, but absolutely, if Haight or Strammel deserved to be on this team, the Wild will figure out a way. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but I think the first point you made is they have to earn the spot. They've got to outplay one of those guys. I think they'll get an opportunity, and they'll have to outplay one of them, and maybe two of them. And if they do, they'll be here, and the Wild will find a way. And this is all too, remember, there's still the possibility of some other trade happening, and in most scenarios that we're expecting, that trade would be more players going out than coming in.
Yeah. Like if they were going to trade for Larkin, they will have to trade salary off this team to become captain.
And they'll have to trade more. Yeah. It'll be a 3 players going that way and 1 coming back kind of trade.
Right. Last question. Greece wants to know, how many mulligans and foot wedges does LaPanta take each round?
0. I do when I'm playing. I take 0, and a part of it is because I started using the Arcos app, and it tracks all your stats for you. And I've found that it doesn't do you any good if you don't count if I hit a lousy one, I got to go hit it from there because I want to know the accurate assessment of my game. So the one thing, a lot of the competition things I'll play, they do allow breakfast balls off the tee. If I'm just playing by myself where I'm keeping score, I don't even do that. But, when you're in a competition, it's like, all right, well, I yank the first one into the hills. It'd be silly for me just because I'm keeping my stats to say, all right, I'm going to go hit from the hills when I'm involved in a match. But other than a breakfast ball on the first tee, none. Now, there are days where I go out and I'm just going to practice, where then it's like, all right, I'm going to hit my drive. I might hit 5 balls from 100 yards to the green, but that's different.
I think you're a sandbagger.
No, actually, you were the one who realized that I'm actually a reverse. You thought I was a reverse sandbagger, which is, and I'm not.
Somebody told me that.
No, it said I was a reverse sandbagger.
Yeah.
But I was just talking to some guys I played with for the first time on Tuesday, and we got done with the round. They asked what my handicap was, and when I told them, I said, you know what, this is what it is, and I trust the handicap system. But the handicap system assigns a value for what you're capable of shooting, and mine is lower than what I would assign myself, just because it only counts your best 8 of your last 20 rounds. And I say out of my last 20, I always have about 4 that are really good rounds. Then I have probably 16, well, I'd probably have, 10 to 12 that I'd say are what I typically shoot, which is 80, 82, somewhere in that neighborhood. But because I 4 times out of 20 will shoot better than that, my handicap is lower, and I have a hard time competing at my handicap number. So it's mine is I post every score. There are some guys that I know that they only post their scores when they're high because they want their handicap to stay high so that then they can win, and that drives me crazy. I'll watch a guy get on the first tee and, I'm an 11, and I'll look at his thing and I'm like, I played against you last week when you shot 78. I don't see that on your handicap thing. All I see on here are a bunch of 85s. So
Name names.
I'm not going to do that.
Do I know them?
No.
Okay. All right. That's the show. September 14th is our next live show. That is at Tuttle, 7 p.m. We will do a show next week. We'll have to figure out the calendar this week, this month. We're going to be doing a lot of shows on the road in the first couple months of the season, Anthony, it seems.
It'll be very exciting.
Yeah. Why don't we have a golf sponsor for as much as we talk about golf?
I think we will.
Arcos app, don't you think?
I would love it. And I'm a big fan of the app. Yeah, I'm going to start. Maybe I'll start trying to come up with somebody that has something to do with golf.
All right. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems. Onyx Maps, where I take a shot at Anthony in our latest ad, and State Farm with Tony.
What do you know about Onyx Maps, by the way?
There's
no way that you could either read a map or use Onyx Maps.
No, I am always looking for the great hunting and fishing spots, and that's the genesis of this self-deprecating ad. So you got to listen to it. This is the problem. You don't listen to this show, Anthony. You miss all these. This is not the first time I've taken shots at you at these ads.
All right, and I'll start to pay more attention.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next week.
So much coming out, there's nothing